Section 0 of a brief account of the destruction of the Indies. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Arnie, Horton. A brief account of the destruction of the Indies by Bartolomé de las Casas. Translator unknown. Section 0. The argument of this narrative by way of preface to the reader. The reverend author of this compendious summary was Bartolomeus de las Casas, alias Casas, a pious and religious person, as appears by his zealous transports in this narrative for promotion of the Christian faith, elevated from a friar of the Dominican order to sit in the episcopal chair, who was frequently importuned by good and learned men, particularly historians, to publish this summary, who so prevailed with him that he collected out of that copious history which might and ought to be written on this subject the contents of this concise treatise, with intention to display unto the world the enormities, etc., the Spaniards committed in America during their residence there, to their eternal ignominy, and for the author finding that no admonitions or reprehensions, how mild soever, could operate upon or sink into the rocky-hearted tyrants in those occidental parts, he therefore took up a firm resolution, being then about 50 years of age, as he himself declares, to run the hazards and dangers by sea, and the risk of a long voyage into Spain, there to acquaint and certify the most illustrious Prince Philip, the son and heir of his Imperial Majesty Charles V of blessed memory, with the horrid crimes, etc., perpetrated in those countries, part whereof he had seen, and part heard from such as boasted of their wickedness. Whereupon his Caesarian Majesty, moved with a tender and Christian compassion towards these inhabitants of the countries of America, languishing for want of redress, he called a council at Valladolid, Anno Domini 1542, consisting of learned and able men, in order to the reformation of the West Indian government, and took such a course that from that time their tyranny and cruelty against those barbarians was somewhat repressed, and those nations in some measure delivered from that intolerable and more than Egyptian bondage, or at least the Spaniards' ill usage and treatment of the Americans was alleviated and abated. This book, mostly historical, part typographical, was published first by the author in Spanish at Seville, after that translated into Latin by himself, and in process of time into High Dutch, Low Dutch, French, and now English, which is the 6th language it has been taught to speak, that anyone, of what nation soever, might in this narrative contemplate and see as in a mirror the dismal and pernicious fruits that lacquey and attend unlimited and close-fisted avarice, and thereby learn to abhor and detest it, Cain, Pejus, and Angui, it being the predominant and chiefest motive to the commission of such inexpressible outrages, as here in part are faintly, not fully represented, which sin the pagan Indians themselves did exprobate in the Spaniards with all detestation, ignominy, and disgrace. For when they had taken some of them prisoners, which was rarely, they bound them hand and foot, laid them on the ground, and then pouring melted gold down their throats, cried out and called to them aloud in derision, "Yield, throw up thy gold, O Christian, vomit and spew out the metal which hath so inquinated and envenomed both body and soul, that hath stained and infected thy mind with desires and contrivances, and thy hands with commission of such matchless enormities. I will then shut up all this, being but an extract of what is in the prefatory part of the original. I earnestly beg and desire all men to be persuaded that this summary was not published upon any
Sample complete. Ready to continue?